Hello, welcome to another edition of Between Two Nuts. I am sitting down today with IronWolf1970, and for the title is called Walking the Golden Path, but it's really a journey into a massive conversation that we've been having here for a short bit. But I wanted to welcome Iron Wolf. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and having a chat.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
And can you tell people a little bit about where they can find you on YouTube or Twitter?
Yeah, you can find me at Roger Larson 1970 on Twitter, or you can find me at on YouTube. It's Iron Wolf 1970.
Awesome. And then people who are watching this video in the beginning, they'll see little pop ups come up of your Twitter info and also your YouTube channel. So, yeah, I would highly recommend following him on both. He does, on his channel, he has some, on his YouTube channel, he has videos about meditation. He also has some animation stuff that he's been working off here and there. But you can find a lot of his artwork on his Twitter account that he's been popping off, which is hilarious. Um, I like the killer porgs. I just do.
Oh yeah.
There's my favorite. It made me so happy. Send them to their gods. It sold me. I was like, "Yep, this is it. This is for me." But
Yeah, that one I got that idea from this fellow named Richard on Twitter.
yes. Mhm.
And I guess he got it from a Halo game or something. Because I had something else on there for the Porg. And he's like, for some reason, every time I see this, I keep seeing, the words "send them to their gods." So I went in and changed
Yeah.
the,
I highly
the
recommend.
phrase on it.
Yeah, I think it's a great fit. I was like, that's perfect. Because yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot of you have Ewoks and all these different well, different, like you've also done some summaries and story writing and things like that.
yeah.
And I like that a lot too. So you people can find that on your Twitter, and they're kind of like synopsis of stories, snippets of stories, and along with photos and just kind of a walkthrough, like a storyboard in a sense, but much more elaborated too. But yes, thank you though for hanging out today. I know it's a busy Thursday for a lot of people, so good times. But what we've been talking about is just the communities of metaphysics and stuff that were in Arizona. Well, for us, I guess, um, is that culture of people who are readers who do different things in reading, whether that's Reiki work or maybe they're a medium, maybe they do clairvoyancy, maybe they're just aura photographers, or there's everybody has a specialty now, and but there's a lot of, I would say, genuine people, and there's a lot of fakes, more so
Oh
fakes it
yeah,
seems,
yeah.
and
It's like the ratio is higher on that end.
yes, absolutely, and I mean, I've met some really phenomenal people that are legit, like very sensitive. Because I was a reader too for a while, and you as well. It's kind of like it's a lifestyle, really, as much as it isn't a title. Um,
Yeah.
it's just the way life is for people who are uh, given different gifts, whatever those are. For some people, they're empaths, and that is a blessing and a curse. And it re-
Yeah.
and
It's tough sometimes.
Now, would you consider yourself an empath in that way?
Yeah, but I get information on a lot of different channels.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sometimes I'll just get words, or sometimes I'll see, like if I'm talking to someone, I'll see a different character that's
Mhm.
actually them behind the face that I'm seeing, or what they're trying to show, other people. And it's like they're not being who they really are.
Yeah.
Or like in the case of Ryan Johnson, I'll just see a 9-year-old sitting there and
Mhm.
I'm like, that's not an adult, that's a 9-year-old.
Right.
And I'll see the face that he's making behind the words that he's saying, and it's like he's not he's not being real with what he's saying,
No.
and so I see behind the facade of that a lot of people are putting up, and it's just like, yeah, no, that's not what it is.
Right.
But and then I'll get other people's like, oh, you're reading too much into this. I'm like, no, I'm not. But that's okay.
Right. And sometimes that's the difficulty with paying attention to people in that way. Some people say, "Oh, that's just cold reading." No, it's not. It's very different.
Yeah.
Cold reading is based on little cues and simple guessing, and being able to read people to some extent. But when you're getting into the emotional part, that's a whole nother bracket. That's empath.
Yeah, I've never done that because I'm feeling everything that someone has gone through.
Right.
And when I first got into readings, I knew I had it down when I made a friend of mine from New York cry.
Mm.
And I'm like, holy crap, I can actually do this. This
Mhm.
is this is real. This isn't just me going, pulling stuff out of my ass. I'm reading people's energy and I'm feeling what they're going through or what they went through. And it's like it's a lot of it's not pretty.
No.
Um, and the
It's
hard part is being able to separate myself from
ah
what they're going through.
yeah. I was just about
And
to
it's like,
say.
okay, let me
Mhm.
pull my energy back a bit and just read it from a distance.
Yeah, because some people like the way that they carry themselves, like um, they're just like I don't know how to explain it. It's like a seeping amount of toxicity on some levels because it's unmanaged. So when that energy
Mm,
is unmanaged, it's like okay, I got to be careful how deep I step into this because it'll get
yeah,
stuck
it's
to me.
messy.
Yeah, and there's some people. It's like I've read people. I don't know if you've had this happen in the past, like where you sit down with them and they're putting on the persona and you tell them something that you know is true, because
Uh-huh.
it's just you feel it, you know it, you see it, and uh, they deny it because they're saving face.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
maybe flash forward a little bit, and all of a sudden they come back around and they're like, that thing you said, and you're like, well, yeah, well, you were right. I just didn't want to admit it. I'm like, yeah, I know, it's cool. Don't worry, it's fine, man. Like nobody likes to hear stuff that's
Yeah.
it's true. Sometimes the truth doesn't need your permission. Like we were saying, I was telling you, I've said this so many
Yeah.
times, but
Yeah.
it's the truth. The truth doesn't need our permission to exist. It just is, and it doesn't pick a side.
Yeah.
It
No,
sucks.
it's completely neutral.
Mhm.
Reality is you have optimists and you have pessimists and you have reality that's smack dab right in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't escape it. No
Mhm.
matter where you go, no matter what you do, you're always going to be faced with it in some way.
Mhm.
And for a lot of people, they can't deal with it, so they'll get into alcohol, they'll get into drugs, they'll they'll get into toys. They'll get into something where they can lose themselves. They can forget about reality. And it's like, okay, well, when you're done trying to forget about reality, it's going to still be there.
Right.
You know.
Exactly. And it's sad because there's so many people that run from reality that eventually when they slow down and everything, all the dust settles and all the
Hmm.
noise is out, then they have to deal with themselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man,
Yeah.
that's when the shit hits the fan. is
Yeah, and
you
the
know
longer they go with avoiding that, the harder it's going to be later on when all of that stuff comes pouring out of the closet they've just opened.
Absolutely. And it's a cycle too. It'll get worse every time that you don't deal with it and you suppress it again or you don't handle it. Even just addressing pieces of it at a time can be helpful. I know it's hard to take a big chunk of something and say, okay, I'm going to deal with all of this at one time. I think moderation is the best way to handle some things, whereas other things should be met
Yeah.
head on, of course. But either way, taking it in chunks and just dealing with pieces of it at a time and getting through it. It's like one of the things I absolutely, ever since I was very young, I don't know. This is a good question, actually. Let me give this to you first. Is
Okay.
when you were young, as you got into adulthood, what is one thing that just absolutely would tick you off, and it was like you felt like you were the only person in the room that could see it.
Uh, when people are lying
Yes,
and I could see right through it.
yes, sir. Oh
And it's
man.
like what you're saying is not registering as truth,
Mhm. Mhm.
and my dad could feel when I could see through him and he would get pissed off,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
it's like I'm just looking at him and just people in general, just people in quote unquote authority, and they're trying to give me this lie, this basically it's a lie
Mhm.
that they're posing as truth, and I'm looking at them going, um, yeah, I'm not seeing it the way you want me to see it. I'm sorry, you
Yeah.
know.
That's the lying thing has always pissed me off. It's been my
And I
that's
have a hard
yeah.
time. I can't change what my face is saying, because my face says what I'm feeling.
Right.
And, I've made people really uncomfortable because I'm looking at them like, you're full of shit. And that's exactly what my face is saying.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So when I see people put on the facade or the mask and they try to pretend and play make believe, I'm just looking at them like, okay, I'm not dealing with an adult.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dealing with a child who wants to play make believe, and that's fine. You want to do that, you knock yourself out,
Yep.
but I'm not going to buy into it for you.
And
So,
that's the part that pisses me off. That pissed me off a lot. As a kid, is like when I realized how much adults lied.
oh yeah,
I was like, wow, man. And they would tell you a tall tale and expect you to accept it. And if you questioned it, they would be angry at you because you were questioning them. But
yeah,
I'm like, well, if you weren't lying, then I wouldn't be questioning you. It's questioning authority. I think is like the one thing that well, for me, I think has changed a lot over the generations. Like now we have more people that are like, well, just you know, putting way too much. What do you call it? Like when it comes to government, as an example. Like I believe in
yeah,
questioning authority completely and absolutely. Considering all sides of a story instead of just taking what they say as their official narrative of whatever it is, because
yeah,
they're full of shit. And you should absolutely question human beings because by nature we all have imperfections. No one is a walking perfection. So the fact that
right.
there's this shunning of questioning authority, I mean, have you noticed that as well? It's like there's less and
Oh
less people
yeah.
questioning authority. I just don't know.
Well, it's not so much. Well, yeah, actually, there's a lot of people that. Here's the problem: people want to believe in something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the one thing that we need to get rid of. We need to get rid of that drive that says you have to believe in something.
Right.
Because belief is basically something that you want to be true, but you don't have any evidence to support it.
Right.
And I come from a scientific mentality
Mm-hmm.
in my approach to spirituality. You've got to run it through the filters first. Is it measurable? Is it observable? Is it repeatable?
Mm-hmm.
And you look at anything through those three lenses, and you can get a pretty good idea of what it is.
Right.
Like when I'm doing a reading, uh, when I first started doing readings, actually, I'd run it through the process of three strikes. If it comes up three times in a reading,
Mm-hmm.
I'll say it. Um, because there'd be a lot of things that would come up, and it's like, wow, that's really intense.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to put it off to the side before I say it, and then it'll come back again. It's like, okay, all right, one more time, I'm going to put it over here. If it comes up a third time, then I'll say it,
Right.
and that way I'm more solid with it. And the
Mm-hmm.
person that I'm sitting with, I can sit there and say, okay, look, this has come up three times, so I'm going to say it. And a lot of times I'll preface, that statement before I'll say it with that phrase, like, okay, this has come up three times, so here it is.
Mm-hmm.
So be prepared.
Yeah.
um
It's
but yeah, people are having a hard time with reality,
yeah.
and each generation it's had a harder time with reality. And the people that had the easiest time with reality were the ones that grew up during the Depression,
Mm-hmm.
because it was in your face. You can't hide from it.
Right.
And the ones that came back from World War II were so bitter and angry because they'd been lied to
Yep.
by the people at the top. And they realized that the war that they fought was not the war that they were sold.
Correct.
And so they came back angry. And I think, oh gosh, what was his name? He wrote uh, the book about Las Vegas, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Hunter S. Thompson.
Yes.
He sat down he actually rode with the Hells Angels for a while.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these guys were World War II vets that had come back from the war and realized that everything that they'd been promised was a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And they were angry. And they develop the mental attitude that says no one's going to give you anything, you have to take it. And from that sprang a whole generation of disrespect. And it's like, well, I'm going to get respect and I want to force people to respect me and I want to take whatever belongs to me.
Right.
But they weren't being genuine with it. They didn't have any real pain. This is just the way they grew up. This is the
It
way
was
they were
it was
raised.
a greed more and like what do you
Well, it was entitlement,
yes. Mhm.
is really what it is. It's like, well, I'm entitled because this is the way I was raised, and
Mhm.
you're gonna do whatever I tell you. But they're not taking the other person's position. It's like, what if the roles were reversed? How would you deal with this?
Right.
Someone's trying to force you to live a life according to their rules. Well,
Right.
you're not going to like it any more than they like it. So that's the thing that they didn't grow up with. They didn't grow up with that perspective of like, okay,
It's kind
yes, this is the way I see life, but how were other people interacting with that reality of mine?
right.
Is it real? You
Mhm.
know? So
And
yeah,
there's a lot of that. It's like it's a like every generation, and this is something that I've noticed especially, and it's gotten worse, is that
yeah.
with those generations, there was a I've written so many freaking papers, it's out of control. When I was in school, because I went into I got a degree in religion, and I wanted to understand how this started, how it went wrong. Like, how did this go off? I'm being honest. Like, I didn't go in there thinking,
Yeah, no,
you know,
I'm laughing because
you know,
I I I understand where you're coming from.
like, because I
I
was like,
get it.
like you grow up around all of this, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Judaism, whether it's whatever it is, pick one, right? There's a batch of them. But where did it go
Yeah.
wrong, let's say, within the Christian church? And it started with the very beginning from
It
Peter. And the
yeah.
moment Peter took over, that's what happened. And I've argued, I've gone after, I've had major arguments about things, and it doesn't matter what that church split it into, meaning if you went to be a Lutheran or not, or Episcopalian. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's still under the same doctrine and same control mechanisms, regardless of how you split apart. So it's getting back
Yeah.
to the prior of Peter taking over and getting back to the original, good night and good luck. But when I was in school, I wrote a paper
Yeah.
about generational consciousness, and meaning from one generation to another, there's warning signs, kind of like people who give us, the red flags saying, okay, well, we don't want to repeat this. So, for
Hmm.
example, you have World War One. The World War One veterans went through. Here in the United States, we showed up late to the war, which is fine because it really wasn't our war. But we went in for a year and a half. But that was enough where when people did come back with either they were dead or they had severed limbs, um,
Hmm.
these were Civil War veterans in some cases that went into World War One. That's why they didn't
Yeah.
want to go into World War One because they were like, we just had a civil war X amount of years ago. It's still fresh.
Yeah.
I still had veterans alive who were like telling their kids, stay the hell out of the war. War, only is
Yeah.
death. There's no winners in war. So when people came back from World War One, you had all of these people that you know were seeing how devastating. That was one of the worst wars ever in history.
Hmm.
It was one of the most devastating, even bypassing Vietnam.
Yeah.
In the numbers alone across the globe, not just America. But fast forward to World War II. The reason why we had World War II is because of one, yay. But
Yeah.
you have all of these generations warning again about not wanting to be in it. Well, we ended up with Pearl Harbor magically, and people had that sense of nationalism that shoved them into war. And it was this misconception of number one how they manipulated that situation, but also these
Hmm.
generational voices were getting lost because of the pomp and vigor of nationalism. But then you get all these veterans that came back from World War II that were being kind of shunned, like the Hells Angels, essentially, and other groups,
Yeah.
and they were voicing displeasure with the government, saying they lied. This is all bullshit. This is all
Yeah.
imaginary, and this glory is all fake. But it got wiped over and ignored and demonized because it wasn't part of the propaganda and the narrative. But that generation's voice was still there. So then you had Vietnam, and then Vietnam
Oh God. Yeah.
we ended up in Vietnam. The Gulf of Tonkin never happened, but we like to pretend it did. And the voices that
Right.
were against that were only like a hand, like maybe two senators that voted against, going into Vietnam. And there's a quote that I use all the time on my channel, but it was just being in the minority doesn't prove that you're wrong. And those two,
Yeah.
they're Democratic senators, but they were, they came from the generation of the greatest generation, so they were well aware that there was something off about this. And yet that we ended up over there, and it was another devastating war. It took many lives, and you have a lot of people that were broken when they came home, and our
Hmm.
country totally shit on them because those generational voices were not being listened to. So with every generation, those voices have gotten smaller and smaller as the red flags to stay out to avoid making the same mistakes. So we ended up in
Yeah.
9/11, going to a country that had nothing to do with anything we were doing, all based on
Two
nationalism.
countries. Yeah.
Yes. So
Now
here,
we're in Syria. How did we get this? But
yep.
this was the it was 10, it's basically 10 wars or something like this. This one I don't know if he was a senator,
Mhm.
congressman, or a general or some. He was one of the top guys, but he has a video on YouTube where he says that this is all Bush's plan. This is like um
Oh, I know who you're talking about. I'm trying to remember the.
yeah,
He was a general.
okay, he was a general. But this is all part of the plan. And Afghanistan was the first step, and then we get into Iraq, and from Iraq we get into you know, well, where we're at now, Syria. But basically, it's the whole Middle East that we're after, and it's like, why,
Mhm. Yeah, it
why,
was
you
secret
know?
U.S. plan for the Iraq War.
But
Yep.
if you, it's interesting because this is historical stuff now that we're getting into. And if you go, this goes all the way back to the Sumerians.
Mhm.
And if you look at their writings, they're talking about these gods that came from the heavens.
Mhm.
And the reason why that's the Holy Land is because that's where the gods came down and landed. And it's like that's what makes that holy. Because there's nothing special about that land other than the fact that this is where the gods came down. And
Right.
that's it, and then you know, everyone else was like that kid that copies off that one smart kid in class.
Mhm.
You look at any religious text, you can go back to the Enuma Elish, which is basically the the writings of the Sumerians,
Mhm.
and even the Babylonians they copied the Sumerians. They took their writing, they took their stories, and then they changed them a little bit and made them their own. And then the Hebrews came along and they took the stories that they learned when they were, slaves in Babylon
Mhm.
and absorbed their culture, and then that became the Torah. And then the Christians came along and they copied off the Hebrew Bible, and it's like it's just and that's why each time it gets watered down a little bit more. It gets further and further away from the truth,
Yep.
and that's why I always go back to, well, what do the Sumerians say about it? You
Right.
know,
That's true.
um, because that's the core right there. Everything else is BS.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the closest that we're going to get to the truth is through the Sumerian perspective, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
everything else is just a really bad copy off of it, and
Right.
it's like the game telephone. You know,
Yes. And
so
after a while, everything just kind of like splatters. It doesn't. It's just.
yeah.
It's so and it'd be. I was having a conversation. I'm like, if there was one place I would love to see, just without, break, like, not saying I would ever break and enter, but I'm just saying, would be the Catholic libraries. Through the
Oh my
Catholic,
gosh. Yeah.
because
I think they have a lot of stuff from the Library of Alexandria.
oh, absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. I think there's still, there's been stories I've heard where they're still taking stuff out of, caves and newfound relics and just confiscating them. That's why they have missionaries all over like Africa and a lot of these other countries because they're confiscating not just wealth, but they're
Yeah.
they're taking all of like their
Oh,
their
if there's
relics.
a devil, it's the Vatican.
Absolutely.
That's Satan.
Yep. Yep. Mhm. You want to know what that looks like? There
That's
you go. Right there. Mhm.
yeah. Yep.
And they're the greatest deceivers. They really are
Oh
because
yeah,
you know
they
they
are.
have all of these. I'd love to see that library. I would love to have full access to that. good luck and good night.
Yeah.
But it would be very interesting to see what they would have stored away, because they have doctrine upon doctrine, and of things that would fill in the blanks of to what exactly are the people here on this planet were experiencing in different time
Oh,
frames. And also, I think we would be completely off the timelines that we're being, that when I went to school for all the religion, it was like, yeah, I could see it would totally destroy Christianity, and it would destroy a lot of religions if something were to come in like out of left field and say, well, this isn't actually what you think. And let's just say
yeah.
for the entertainment, we had some ancient alien stuff going on. The
Right.
Anunnaki, quote unquote, were something
Yeah.
else. Then it opens a whole nother Pandora's box. But I mean, it would
But
screw up the
that would
time.
break a lot of people
Oh yeah,
too.
yes, it would.
It would shatter them because their whole reality is based on the belief that these ideas are true. They're truth.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you can't dispute truth, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Um, but anything that tells you don't question, just have faith, just believe what I'm telling you is true, run away.
And this is the thing, is in the Bible. Um, there was a huge portion of it where God, this is usually, in my opinion, whitewashed completely all the time.
Mm,
But
mhm,
it's in there talking about, God saying, I don't want people who don't believe. I want someone who basically, I want you to find your own faith. I don't want you just to take these words for it, or another person's word for it. I want you to find your own faith and find your own path.
mhm.
And then,
Yeah.
and if it in a roundabout way, saying, of course, it'll come back to me, blah blah blah. However, I want you to prove it to yourself, not just come to me blindly, because blind faith is not, when it's not with the right intention, and it's not full, and it's not complete, meaning you don't really have faith at all. You're just going along with the motions. It's
Mhm.
empty. It's an emptiness there. You need to have a connection to it. You need to have some kind of regard to it. I know people who don't believe in anything, and that's totally fine. Um,
Mhm.
but even atheism has turned into its own form of cult thinking, where,
Yeah.
and I have friends that were dedicated atheists, and now they're like, I'm agnostic. Everyone's lost their mind. I'm like, okay, because they're like, there's something out there. They just don't know what it is. They don't necessarily believe in a Christian God or any particular God of a faith, but they know that there's something bigger. And when it comes,
Well,
you know,
the thing is though, when you look at history, I mean, you look at religions getting recycled,
mhm,
and you have the Greek gods, you have the Egyptian gods,
mhm,
and then you have Akhenaten, which tried to eliminate all the Egyptian gods except for the sun god,
right,
and that didn't last long.
nope,
Um, you've got the gods of the Sumerians, but they weren't really gods in the classical sense.
mhm,
These were beings that interacted with people on a daily basis. So it's not about belief. It's like this is just reality.
right,
This is just the way it is. These beings are here. They're greater than us. We revere them.
right,
The word worship is all about serving the gods.
correct,
That's how you worship. You serve the gods. Well, what does that mean? It's like, well, you make sure that they're taken care of. If they need a place to stay, they have a place to stay. If they need to eat, you provide the food. You
right,
serve the gods.
mhm,
And that's where it all came from. And all of a sudden the gods left. Well, what are we left with? Well, we have to believe that they're real.
right,
And once you've eliminated the reality, now you have to establish a fantasy,
correct,
and that fantasy has to be the root reality on which you base your life, because oh, what if they come back?
mhm,
But the thing is, though, we've gotten so far away from that, that
yeah,
if they did come back, you know there would be a lot of problems. It's like,
oh,
who's this Jesus guy? Who's Yahweh? Who are all these people that you've been worshiping?
and that's another, like, that's a topic right there alone.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's like, I've had these long conversations with my friend Rich, and he and I were on hiatus, but we did a podcast for a while, and we would talk about this stuff, and there's been stuff I've seen and uh, I experienced personally that I to this day cannot explain. But at the same time, there's something about what they have not disclosed with us about, I would say, without getting, I'm not trying to go completely off the rails, but there is alien life here. I just don't know what the hell it is. Like, it comes in so many different forms that, well, we would never.
Yeah,
I do believe that. I just do. There's been so much weird shit, and like people I've spoken to who are very well rounded, maybe even religious, and they're like, I've had to reevaluate everything.
yeah.
You know, and
And that's what you do when your beliefs clash with reality.
mhm,
And that's why, I don't deal with beliefs, I deal with understandings.
right,
Because a belief, once you've seen through it, you have to replace it with something else.
right,
With an understanding, it keeps expanding,
absolutely.
you know.
Because really, it's
So
just you have
it's not
pieces.
fixed.
Right, you have pieces of a puzzle. You don't have
Yeah.
the completion. So it's like I think the meaning of life. What do you think the meaning of life is for you? Like, meaning, what do you think that meaning of life is?
It's having purpose.
Mhm.
Everyone has purpose. They're not always connected to it.
Right.
And there's something that I take people through. I call it the soul frequency. And I used to call it soul purpose.
Mhm.
But there is a root word that is embedded within the consciousness of all beings on this planet. And it's taken away from them in childhood. They don't have access to it. Um, and once they connect back to it, they realize that this is what life is all about for them.
Mhm.
And once you've connected to that, then life comes, okay, how can I implement this into everything that's around me? What is it that I can be doing that aligns with this principle?
Mhm.
And the soul purpose or the soul frequency is basically your essence in the universe.
Mhm.
And we're nothing more than representatives of that aspect in the universe. And
Right.
if you look at the universe, it's made up of all these different galaxies spinning around doing their own thing.
Right.
Each and every one of those galaxies is a an aspect
Mhm.
of the overall, right?
Right.
So if you say, okay, it's like a quality, let's say this person over here, every time I'm around them, I always feel strong.
Right.
And that means that they represent strength. They may not be consciously aware of it, but that's something that they just exude naturally.
Right.
It's like body odor. It's
Right.
there.
And there's
So
that's a
everyone has a quality.
I yep.
Another person was like balance, or this person's centered, or this person is always about empathy or healing.
Mhm.
So you have all these different qualities in life, even being honest, having integrity, truth. Okay. These are, if you look at it and say, well, what's the difference?
Oh,
Well, there's subtle differences
yeah.
between all of them, you know.
Yeah.
So, and these are things that we look for from others as well. And if we don't get it, we feel out of balance.
Yes. I mean,
Like if you represent honesty and you're around people who are dishonest, you're not going to feel comfortable. That's not your space.
yeah, it's kind of
And
like
so you're,
what do you call it when people are disingenuous or superficial, and
yeah,
they intermingle with you.
insincere.
They,
Yeah.
if it's not you that's repelled, they're repelled because if you speak in honesty or if you're genuine, you know what I
Yeah.
mean. They get repelled, or they get really
Right.
nasty. They get very
Yeah.
aggressive or even defensive, really, and all defense in the end. But you can feel it because they run the opposite direction, and you're like,
Yep.
interesting, you know,
Yeah.
interesting, because yeah, everyone's got personality traits that they may not care for, and we all carry something somebody may not like, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
in the end, though, if you're just being genuine, and that's, you are who you are, um,
Right.
there's nothing more empowering than being yourself. it, it,
Yeah.
it absolutely is the most empowering thing in the world, in a society where there's so many people trying to keep up with the Joneses or the Kardashians, whichever you prefer. They have a very difficult time just being themselves because they don't know themselves very well. And
Mm-hmm.
it was interesting. You made a comment, and I don't mean to cut you off at all, but there was
It's okay.
there was something you had said about a smell, and
Yeah.
there is a smell. It's a like for example, when somebody, I've had to say this so more than once in the past, when someone is deceitful and consistently
Mm-hmm.
so, or they're narcissistic, which is even worse, it's really hard to deal with that. Narcissistic, like a narcissistic personality disorder type of example, there is a stench that they carry with them, and
Mm.
it's very thick, and uh, it's just like a fog. It's disgusting, and
Wow.
I get repulsed by it very quickly. And at first, I don't realize why, because I'm just like reacting first. I'm like, okay, I'm going over here, um, because at first, I once I recognize the smell, I realize they're so deep in it's you can't reach them because
Yeah,
they're too far gone, and it's like a and it's but it is a smell, and it's a spiritual smell. I don't know how to explain that. It sounds very cheesy and crystal winds, but it's
no,
true. You know,
yeah,
that smell thing is very true, and I've had to try to explain this to people before, and it's hard to explain it because it's just enough where I will be repelled, like enough. Um, but
that's good that you have that. For me, it's just knowing.
yeah.
I just know when someone's being, dishonest.
Mhm.
It's just like, yeah, no, you know.
Well, they're
And a
just
lot of people get offended, when I call them on that, or when I'm talking about someone else being a certain way. It's like you're reading too much into it, but it's like that's their own insecurity
yeah.
that doesn't want to be exposed as well. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, I see where you're coming from. I get it. No worries.
And there's like
Moving on.
well yeah, but it's true though. I mean, it's when you dishonesty like that is uh, very much a pet peeve for me. It's been like that for a long time, and enough where I'm just like, man, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this person. Like it took me a while. Like there's a part of everyone's personality that when we look at ourselves, especially. And then I'm going to ask you this question, and then after you're done, I'll give you my answer too. But
Sure.
what is something about yourself that frustrates you, but you know it's for the better, meaning that you know it's a good thing, but it's something about your personality that is a struggle, meaning it's like, God, man, that is my Achilles heel, or that is that one thing that always agitates me, but I know it's a good thing long term, but short term, it's a pain in the ass.
That I can't do enough.
mm,
Um, because there's so many things that I can see happening in the world, and it's like I I've spent the last, I don't know, 15 years of my life, well, since 2004, let's say,
mm-hmm,
um, developing techniques for people.
right,
And uh, and this is not a philosophy. These are actual techniques, exercises that people can go through
mm-hmm,
to eliminate all the stuff that's holding them back. And it's like having the cure for cancer, but nobody wants to be cured.
right,
Okay.
mm-hmm,
Imagine how frustrating that would be. And this is something I've had to deal with over time. And it's like I'm talking to people and something will come up. It's like, well, do you want to deal with that? And they were like, no, no, I'm good. I'm good. No, I'm okay. And I'm just going, you
right,
know,
right,
like seriously, who do you think you're fooling? The only person that you're fooling right now is yourself,
right.
and but then, I have to walk away from it. I was just like, okay, that's cool, whatever. And then the thing is that they still continue to try to sell me on their lie. I'm like, dude, stop.
right.
Seriously. I see through it, and I know you see that I see through it. So just walk away. Be happy that you're living your lie
It's
and
true.
that you're okay with it.
Yeah, it's
just
true.
just take that with you,
Right.
because you're not going to sell me on your BS,
That is, yep.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, for me, it's like I think that's the hardest thing people have with me, is that they can't sell me on their lies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I'm good with myself to the point where I don't need to take on any more baggage. It's
Yeah.
like if I get baggage, I'm looking at it, I'm breathing through it, I'm dealing with it
Right.
because I don't want it.
Yeah.
It's like it's like walking into someone else's house and they haven't taken the garbage out for like, their whole life.
Right.
And you're going, what's that smell? And they're going, what do you mean? What's that? Oh, let me get the Lysol.
Right. I'm just gonna cover
And
it. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and they just cover it over. They get the Febreze or whatever, and then everything is okay. And it's like not only can I smell the garbage now, but now I could smell the chemicals that you just sprayed over the garbage. And now it's just like, you know what? I got to go. I can't be around this
Yep.
because I see the world the way it is, and that's just the way it is.
And it's hard seeing through that lens, in that sense, because my
Well, it's
frustrate.
hard because no one else is seeing through it or doesn't.
Right. They don't
It's
want to.
not that they're not seeing it; they don't want to.
Right.
That's the difference. They don't want to.
And
And when I catch people doing that, I'm like, okay, I this is not a real conversation.
right. They're just on autopilot of imagination time, and
Yeah,
and once you realize that they're on imagination land, you're like, well, okay, well, I'm gonna go over here and do my thing, and you just go and flutter off. I don't, one of the things I struggled with, I still do, is I look at things very realistically in the context of I don't believe in superficial empathy, or
mm,
sympathy, meaning giving people empathy just because I don't know how to explain this. It's tough love thinking, and uh, for a long time I wasn't that way. I was very much like a little bit of the bleeding heart, and people saw that as a weakness, unfortunately. If I want to
yeah.
help, I'm genuine about it. It's not because I'm out for a benefit of some type or to gain something from it. Um, it's because I
For
want
me, it's
to do it.
about being real.
Right. I just want to
You
help.
don't have to be tough love. You don't have to be overly empathic or empathetic.
Hmm.
It's just be real.
Hmm.
Whatever it is that person needs,
Right.
be that for them. If you can't be for that for them, walk away.
Right.
Let someone else fill that space. Don't hog it.
Right. And
And
what is it? The mother the in my brain, it's like when somebody brings example, somebody brings you a scenario, and it's like you see it for what it is, and you're like, okay, well then you tell me what you're seeing exactly of how to fix this.
mm,
I'm not going to fix it for you. This
yeah,
isn't my job to fix it for you. I can only like, direct you and say, look over there. What do you think of that? I can't
yeah,
clean your house for you, and nor can I give you falsified empathy or superficial empathy. And other people call it tough love, but it's the reality of how
yeah.
the world is. It's the reality of how you're dealing day to day. You're going to have a job where, let's say it's a job, you just got a brand new job, but all of a sudden you're getting exploited by your boss for hours. Suddenly you're getting
Hmm.
guilted into hours. That job, that employer is an opportunist because he thinks that he can do that with you. So you need to establish yourself, stand on your own 2 feet, tell him in so many words or less in a very nasty or, whatever way it fits the person, to be honest, because you have to communicate, um, that it's clear that you're not going to be exploited. Nobody else can white knight that for you. You have to do that.
Yeah.
And with women, especially, I'm hard on women to some extent because there's a lot of, like, with every gender, unfortunately, they've kind of floated into certain categories of thinking, meaning codependency is okay here, marrying someone for the money is okay there, appearances are everything, between this and this. But the problem is that you're not being genuine, and no matter what you're doing in these areas, you have
Hmm.
to be of a strong mind. You have to find your independence. But in order to do
Yeah.
that, you have to take the steps to do that. I can't give you falsified empathy when I know I'm just helping you crush your own foot. Like I can't do that,
Yeah.
you know? And so it's almost like lack of better words, it's like a parenting. So
Oh God.
the
Yeah.
struggle is, and this is what I've always, and I didn't know that's what it was. I got called mother hen all the time because I'd be the one person that would be like,
Yeah.
"That's a bad idea." This isn't going to end well, because I was seeing the long term the long term and the short term benefits and negativity pieces, I guess, and going, well, that's not going to work. And it's a parenting thing. So it goes back to we have a lot of children that have not been parented. I mean, these are all ages, not, it's a mental age thing.
Hmm.
And that's what I was struggling with because I had all these young, what do you call it, young people that were supposed to be my elders doing things that I knew at 16 were a bad idea, you know, and then
Mm,
justifying such actions. And that's something I still see repeated all the time. People, example, especially when it comes to money, people
mm-hmm.
will play a role and be very fake and very superficial, all in the name of cash. And I'm like,
That's their God.
yes,
That's, and they have to put on the face for their God,
and
and in order to gain favor.
it blows my mind because then the fallout, yeah, you might have the cash, but cash is very liquid. Nothing is permanent in life, period.
Hmm.
But it's a very short term gain for a long term burden because then
Yeah.
you're carrying a bunch of crap that's not yours. You're carrying stuff that's you've collected that you don't need, that you've created a false persona of that isn't who you really are. It's not who you know what I mean? So when you come at the tail end of it, you don't know who the hell you are. You either you're your vice or your brand or your ego most of the time. And
Yeah.
that's egos are nothing but a bunch of earth, the earth brain thinking. It's earth brain. You're just thinking materialism and physicality and not thinking with a heart at all, or even a
Yeah.
spiritual eye at all. And you lose yourself in there. And that's, to me, it's like the saddest thing in the world to see. I've met some phenomenal people that took that easy road of taking in the
Hmm.
money and running with it and then losing themselves completely to the point where they don't even know who they are and they're miserable. And I'm like, there's a way to fix this, but you're not going to like it. It's just, it's hard, but it can be done. It's just, there's a lot of stuff to fix, meaning in yourself. You have to evaluate it. But it's the lying, the self deception, and not having an adult, lack of better words, an adult
Yeah.
or a parent say, listen, no, I'm not going to give you what you want to hear. I've had people ask me an opinion, and I'm like, you don't want it. You just want me to tell you what you want to hear. Don't ask me again.
Right. That's the problem.
You know.
Yeah. They want a medication.
Yes.
They want that opiate.
Yes.
And, so much of what is being administered in religious circles is nothing more than opium for the soul or opium for the brain.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to tell you this feel good message. And this is the same thing that's happening in the the metaphysical,
Mhm.
the new age movement, like
Oh
I'll
yeah.
call it.
Oh yeah.
It's all about an opiate for the mind. I'm going to say this blessing to you and make you feel good about yourself and tell you how awesome and amazing you are. And it's like this is all just superficial.
Mhm.
It's just stroking someone's ego. And my my experience with the ego is that there are mature egos and there are immature egos.
Mhm.
And the ego is basically a child that needs to learn how to grow up.
Yeah.
And people are stuck at different levels of ego. There's the infant ego, which is it's all about me.
Oh yeah.
There's the child ego, which is, well, it's all about feeling. And then there's the adolescent ego that's stuck in the intellect.
Yeah.
And then there's the teenage ego where it's like, don't tell me, I already know. I know everything.
Mhm.
And then there's the adult ego. It's like, okay, let's just sit down and have a conversation. Let's
Right.
talk about this. I'm going to listen to you, and then you're going to listen to me. It's an exchange.
Right.
And then the higher ones, the higher vibrations, you have the spiritual ego, which is I see the truth, I see you.
Mhm.
And then you have the ascendant ego, which is I am.
Yeah. The iron presence.
And that's understanding.
Yeah.
So once we get to understanding, we become what we know. We become what we're seeing. And the spiritual ego is the one that has all the insights, but hasn't put all the pieces together for the understanding.
Right.
And most of the people that you deal with in everyday life, they're either at the infant stage, and you see a lot of these girls, they do the duck face and they're constantly taking selfies,
Yeah.
and they're completely helpless. They need to have people doing things for them. That's the infant ego. It's like you're dealing with an infant, and if you get into a relationship with them, you're dealing with an infant.
Yeah, and it's not
Um,
pretty. Not pretty at all.
well, no, because they're not taking responsibility,
Mhm. Mhm.
and a lot of the intellectuals, they're at the adolescent stage because, it's all about what their thoughts are or what they read or what they are assuming to be true as opposed to what they know to be true,
Right.
and any teenager that you talk to, they know what's going on, but they don't know how to communicate it because they haven't had the experience.
Right.
They have the intuition, they know, but they don't know what to do with it.
Right.
And they don't know how to apply it, how to implement it. And with the adult, it's it's difficult because it's like, look, just listen to what I'm saying for a moment. And the moment you say that to a teenager of any age, it could be a 90-year-old, it could be a 25-year-old. If you're dealing with a teenage ego, they're going to shut down automatically.
Yep.
They're going to do the exact opposite of anything you try to tell them.
Mhm.
And when you're dealing with an adult ego, at least they're willing to listen,
Yeah.
you know. But when you're dealing with the what I call the elder at the spiritual level, where they can see what's going on, it's like, yeah, I see the same thing.
Mhm.
But even that has its limitations because you can see the truth, but you don't know what to do with it because you don't have the understanding of the bigger picture.
Right.
And and sometimes people will see enough. It's like, okay, I see the truth, but what am I supposed to do with it
Right.
now that I've seen it? And that's when we just need to step back and go, okay, let's see how this plays out and see where it goes. And then once we're able to make a decision, then we can do something,
Exactly.
you know.
And
But
it's
yeah,
getting to that point, and especially when you're dealing with so many younger souls.
yeah,
I go for the young and old souls, just easier to summarize. But
yeah.
the young souls are so difficult to not so much wrangle, but to communicate with. I feel like
Well,
it's a bit of
you
a
have to look at what age you're dealing with
right.
because each soul fits into one of those categories.
Mhm.
They're
Mhm.
either at the infant stage, the child, the adolescent, the teen, the adult, the elder, or the ascendant. And
Right.
there's not a lot of ascendants out there because once you have that ascendancy, do you really need to be here?
Right. You kind of hit your quota.
But then, well, or, and that's when you have what are called, I guess, the bodhisattvas,
Yes.
who make a choice, a conscious choice to stay in order to pass on what they've experienced, what they've learned, you know.
That's a it's when you're in a society that feeds into the younger souls more often.
Hmm.
It's very difficult to break. It's almost like I've met people that were into adult. They were in adult stage. And because of the way that they were intaking whatever knowledge or information, it appeared that they were younger than what they were because they were
Yeah,
buying into, let's say, certain things like societal rules or cultural norms or whatever those things were instead of questioning those or putting it through
yeah.
filters. And I've had to, like, sit down and talk with them a little bit about coming out of that funk. I'm like, listen,
Hmm.
that's not what it seems. Take a step back about it. Take a step back about it and look at it in this way. This is like a trap. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's a way of getting you stuck. And I do think that there's been limitations put into place long ago. Um, it starts in childhood, especially, where I've met very well gifted kids, very gifted, and very,
Hmm.
very old souls that were repressed by,
Yeah.
I mean, just repressed. There's no other word for it in my mind at that point. They couldn't break out of it. And because of their environment or the adults around them and religion, I absolutely accuse that of being a big problem of it. And
Yeah.
they really just bubble them up and say, no, you can't move outside of this box. You have to stay in this box. And those kids never really, they when they finally break out of it, it's like it's coming out of a coma. You're like, oh my god. You're like, where have I been? And there's a lot of anger, and that just, it makes it more difficult for them to kind of come over those obstacles, which they can. But it's understanding that there's a repression that happened when you're young. What is I was was very lucky as a kid, but at the same time, there was always those inklings of repression, trying to like say that's not acceptable, that's not normal. You need to not say this, need to not say that. You can't really be this way or say that. And
Yeah.
yes, we need to have filters and be in a polite society to some extent, but it doesn't mean you can be disingenuous all the time either. You can be yourself. It's just not going to be an easy path in a society where everyone's following rules that are dictating how they need to be. Or
Yeah.
look is a better word.
Well, all that stuff was put in place by, um, yeah, again, it comes back to the maturity of the soul.
Mhm.
You have to look at the age of the soul of the person that you're dealing with.
Mhm.
And, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to match their physical age.
No, no, it won't.
And that's the mistake that people make in society, is that they take things at face value and
And
they
here's
don't question, they don't look, you know.
and here's the other thing too. Going back to the metaphysical groups and the community and the crap they used to push. And I say it's crap because yeah, um, the violet children, the crystal children, all of that nonsense.
Okay.
Um, they push this on everybody, and this
Okay.
this title, and it went
Yeah.
on for years. And they tried that crap with me. I didn't like it. I was like, no, thank you. And the reason why I understood the meaning behind it, but I also understood that there was something about this that was not acceptable, like the labeling and the placement,
Hmm.
because I didn't like how they were throwing all of these types of quote gifted type kids they considered gifted, whatever that was, and throwing them into a
Yeah.
bracket and saying that these are these special kids and they're this and they're all like pretty little princesses and princes that are so gifted and they should be their old souls and all this crap. And
Yeah.
most of the time, and I'll be honest with you, a good portion of those kids were not. They were just thrown there to be made to feel a certain way, and I didn't like
Well,
that.
they're looking for the next Messiah.
Correct.
That's basically what it is. And it's like, okay,
Very.
you're putting all this pressure on these kids to be something that they really aren't.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
You
and
know.
I think that's the psychosis of the parent
Mhm.
that they're trying to pass on to the child, because, well, if I'm going to buy into this, you have to. And again, it comes back to, this is religion, because um, the parents believe that something is true, therefore the children must also believe that this is true.
Right.
And so basically it's just, it's spiritual slavery. I wore these chains, you have to wear the chains too.
Yes. That's exactly it.
And
And I don't like
it
doing that to anybody, especially children. It's children are exceptionally perceptive. They're very intelligent. They
hmm
have to be permitted the leeway not only to make mistakes. That's the biggest thing, and is not being allowed to make mistakes because that was one thing I remember that I've noticed flush between the metaphysical community into, let's say, regular quote day-to-day life outside of that community, whereas they tell them how special they are, but they don't allow them to fail because they're
hmm
they're afraid it's going to self-reflect on them in some way. But the child is not allowed to fail because
yeah.
it'll look bad on the parent in their mind to some extent. Um, so these kids were being constantly coddled and carried and prevented from failing. And
Uh-huh.
now we have an entire generation of children who were not allowed to fail, who have a difficulty with truth, have a difficulty with things that are offensive, have a
Uh-huh.
difficulty just managing their lives and being normal, I say in quote, normal adults, and they're rejecting having children. And there's nothing wrong if you don't want to have kids. I don't have a problem with that. But the reasonings for them not wanting to have kids make no sense. Meaning that
Yeah.
it's very off the wall reasons. Meaning, oh well, I don't. I don't have time for it. I can have them when I'm in my 40s, or I can do this. It's like not thinking logically and not thinking about the child's welfare long term. and only thinking of themselves. And it's because of not failing and always having someone to clean up their messes for them. Now
Hmm.
they're dysfunctional adults who cannot keep a job long. And if they do have a job, they suck at it because they're failing up. They're not helping these, allow them to fail, and,
Hmm.
and have repercussions for such failures because otherwise there's no growth and understanding of, hey, I shouldn't repeat this again. I should try to better myself or maybe find a different path that suits my abilities. There's
Well,
no,
there's
you know,
something else in the equation is that we're going through a massive shift right now
mhm,
where everything we've been taught is being exposed for what it is.
mhm,
And I'm not saying everything we've been taught is a lie, but it's being exposed for what it is,
right,
good or bad.
mhm,
And all the old structures are starting to come apart. And everything that we've been taught to rely upon is becoming um, uncertain.
mhm,
And this has been going on for some time. All the veterans that came back from World War II,
mhm,
all the veterans that came back from Vietnam. I mean, wow. I mean, you want to talk about blatant, in your face lies.
mhm,
I mean, the whole reason we were in Vietnam was for the heroin trade because the CIA was there. We had to be there.
mhm,
And to make sure that that place was stable enough so that the CIA could do whatever it is they needed to do. Um, and the guys that were coming back, they were realizing that the government didn't have their back
right,
and that they had been exposed to so many different things and now their children are paying that price. They're coming out deformed and stuff. And come to find out that a few years ago that the US government made this huge payment to the people in Vietnam, which I'm not totally against. I understand it. It's like,
mhm,
yeah, we spread, this Agent Orange over there, and it created a generation of deformed people.
yeah,
So we made this huge payment to the Vietnamese people, which we should have done a long time ago because of what we did. But what we didn't do, what the government didn't do, was it didn't extend that same service to the people that it sent over there.
mhm,
All the soldiers and all the personnel that were forced to go there or had to go there, there was nothing for them,
right.
you know, and that's the bitterness that I'm seeing happening more and more. It's like it's the anger is being churned,
And there's
and
it's that also it's that like the government's behavior, it reflects that, like you said earlier, it is that generation that's running the government now. So there's
yeah,
still no apologies, no true
no,
accountability that's being put out there at all. So it's carrying on this. It's kind of like the parent when a parent's wrong. Let's say it's a terrible parent. This terrible parent does something terrible to their kid, and they look at their kid like maybe they've abused them or done something terrible to them, and instead of apologizing to them, they just treat them decently for the next 24 to 48 hours. So there's no real
yeah,
apology, there's no accountability, but the child is still left with carrying that anger and resentment, you know. And
right,
and this is what we
yeah, they
have.
get the guilt gifts,
Yes, you're gonna get brownies. Like that. I know I beat
yeah,
your ass, but here's some brownies. It's the same. It's that same logic, and that's what we're seeing. I agree. I mean, it's a generational impact of no checks and balances, no accountability, a lot of just wicked uh, narcissism that's increased and increased and increased, and um, it's to the point where like you could show someone the blatant truth, and they'll just look at you like they don't understand how to speak the English at all. You know.
the difference between a parent and the people in the government is that you with the government you get this Machiavellian ideal
Mhm.
of wanting to hold on to power no
Mhm.
matter what.
Right.
And the thing is you're riding a wild beast when you're in that kind of position because you realize that you're outnumbered. Um, and this is the problem that that Rome had. They had all
Mm.
these people that they had to control.
Mhm.
So it's really about keeping everybody calm and um, not getting them to the point where they rebel and there's civil war, and then you lose your power.
You keep them nice
Um,
and calm and sedated.
but we're getting a combination of that.
Mhm.
There's things like, okay, just keep them calm, let them have their SUVs that use up all this gas and create all these problems. But at the same time, they're creating a lot of chaos and confusion to make us reliant on the government because people don't know what to do.
Right.
And many of them aren't even armed. They don't know how to defend themselves. They don't have any self protection.
They have no.
And so they have to rely on the government to
Mhm.
tell them what to do, to protect them. It's like, oh, we'll call the police. Screw the police. Let's get the guns and we'll just,
Right.
we'll
Mhm.
guard the home front. And that's what you did when you're out on, out in the what was it? What do they call it? The frontier.
Yes.
There was no government. You had to wait like a week for the cavalry to get there. It's like, okay, we got to take care of ourselves.
Right.
And we've lost that living in these cities. Now
Yep.
we're dependent upon a police force that abuses its powers.
Mhm.
And you have some good people in there, but they can't do anything because the system is so corrupt.
Right.
And that chain goes all the way up to the top.
And
And,
they've taken
it's,
away. They've taken away our sense of survival instincts, the natural. It's like they're trying to almost devolve. It's a regression. So they're taking away
yeah,
that ability to want to fight or flight, right? And
right.
and by nature, if someone threatens my child, I'm not going to just call the police and hope for the best. You know,
Yeah,
that's the truth. If something comes down to it, well, screw you, stand my ground. Like if somebody is going after my child, I'll go to court and deal with it. You know,
yeah.
that's the way it goes, and that's without question. But for a lot of people, they would question it, and they would allow these things to happen. And
Hmm.
that's the oh man, this opens up so many other connections to that. With the whole
Yeah.
like I would say what do you call it, feminizing of men.
Oh God.
Oh my God. Um,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother topic, but it's still connected to the survival instincts of what families would do to protect themselves. Well, first off, there was a family, so you had
Yeah.
fathers and mothers, and and you had grandparents, you had even aunts and uncles in some cases, and everyone would take care of one another. You had communities and good, healthy communities where people actually spoke to their neighbors, and there was a system of checks and balances. We've lost all of these things, and cities have absolutely taken that away. But living in a city too, it's like I lived in a city for a long time when I was a kid, and I learned very quickly how to keep, especially as a female. There's stuff that comes down your way that you would never expect, whether that's predators most of the time.
Hmm.
Being able to take care of oneself, but using the common street smart common sense to know how to get out of a bad situation that you might be in just because you're walking home from school, but making the smart decisions and being quick about it, not just fear. Don't immediately just
Yeah.
go to fear, but going based on fight or flight. Do I
Hmm.
fight this or do I get the hell out of here? Like, what are the better options? And making that case, but we're taking away those things from people so they don't know how to survive without daddy government telling
Yeah.
telling them what to do. And
Well, that's how
yeah,
you retain your power. You make everyone dependent upon you
mhm,
to the point where if you threaten to leave, it's like, please don't go.
mhm,
We need you. We want you. And any government wants to have that kind of devotion because that's what's going to keep the system going.
absolutely,
These supposed leaders that people vote for, they have a time limit for how long they can stay in there. I mean, senators and congressmen, it's different, but the presidents and governors and all that stuff,
mhm,
it's a turnstile. They come in, do their time, and then they leave.
right,
But what people don't think about are the civil servants that are always there.
right,
Nobody votes for them. Somebody hired them, and they're entrenched. They're the middle management.
Right.
And so basically they're like the abdomen. They're the core muscles of the body.
Mhm.
You look at the president, that's just the head.
Mhm.
Or it's a hat, and the head wears different hats.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I don't like this hat anymore. Let's change it. Okay, I'll wear this hat for a while. But the core muscles are in the middle. And this is exactly where people are not looking.
Yep.
Who's running the government on from the inside?
Mhm.
Everyone's blaming the president. Well, okay, the president's implementing these things and he's able to get the abs to do what he wants them to do. But then once he's gone, then what?
Right.
It's going to be someone else. And maybe it's going to be a weaker president. I don't care if they're a Republican, a Democrat, or whatever.
Right.
It's the middle, it's the abdomen. And it's interesting because there's a show that was on in England. It was called Yes Minister.
Mm. Yeah.
And it was really about the civil servants,
Right.
and the people that are the unseen. They're the ones that are keeping everything going.
Right.
And if the minister has an idea, we need to convince the minister that that is not a good idea. If it conflicts with the way everything's been running. And this one minister is saying, if I believed um, in what this minister was doing, what this administration was about, I'd be a schizophrenic, you know.
Right.
And the fact is that he didn't believe in any of them.
Right.
He only believed to the point it's like, okay, this is what it needs to be for the moment. And so one moment we're against guns, the next moment we're for guns, the next moment we're on the fence about guns.
Right.
And it's just putting on the face, and that's government. And this is something that people don't realize. But as we become more corporatized, people are starting to realize that it's like, wait a minute, um, this is the same thing.
Right.
So with the corporations, we're getting a glimpse of how politics actually works because everything is highly politicized.
Oh
And
yeah.
unfortunately, it's getting into the military. It's all
Mhm.
politics now. You're not dealing with, okay, this is what we need to be doing because it's the right thing to do. It's more like, well, this is what looks good on the surface,
Right.
so that's what we're going to do.
It looks good on the
You know,
surface, and what do we get out of it? You know,
right? Exactly.
as opposed,
And
and it's
this
like
is
a
exactly,
what do you call it? A
yeah.
short-term point of view versus the long-term road. There's been a lot of
Well, it's
short-term fucking decisions.
yeah,
You know, and
but this is the lesson of immersion.
yeah.
You need to experience it to realize what it is for what it is
Right.
before you go, okay, I've had enough. Let's create something better. This isn't working.
Right.
Everybody has to take a bite of this. Everyone has to really feel what it is in order for them to go, oh, now I get it. And once they
Absolutely.
get it, you know, yeah.
It's one of those things too over time that people will either understand this a little bit more or they'll just go further and further regressed. And
Yeah.
it's kind of we're in a weird time right now where things are being, more exposed, especially let's say in
Hmm.
media as a big one. Um
Oh gosh, yeah.
what a miracle that is, right? Um but it like when you turn on the CNN or MSNBC and it's, I say I've said it a couple of times, but it makes me laugh because it's true is that I don't watch these things. I haven't actually for many, many years. And then I started hearing complaints about it. And then when I did watch a segment on a CNN segment with supposedly not a commentary, it was just a regular news story. It sounded like they were talking out of their diary, you know, and it was very like,
Wow.
I feel or my take. I don't give what your take is, man. You're a reporter, like
Yeah.
you're
They're
reporting.
supposed to be what was it? Not just detached, but they're supposed to be impartial.
Yes, like
I'm not here for your opinion. I'm just here for you to report on what's happening.
correct. And that's
Yeah.
something that's, it's been going on. It's just gotten way more exposed, I would say, and more dramatic after post Trump. I think even prior to Trump, it was there, in my opinion, as far as like the behavior. There was a lot of like superficial behavior that was already kind of skewed. but it just came out into full light, like rats on a ship. It was like
Yeah.
everything came out right after, I mean, Trump was elected. And I'm not going to lie, it was probably the most entertaining. This has been the most entertaining ride I've seen with media because it's exposed so much, just bias and prejudice, and
Mm-hmm.
also the corporate handlers at the top who own these companies, what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing, what their motives are. They give Fox News a lot of shit, but they're all doing the same thing. And it's sad because
Yeah.
CNN used to be at least I would say, more of a medium. They would have their moments of bias for sure, but it wasn't as terrible and aggressively bad as it's been, like I would say, within the last 5 years. Just meaning in your face bad, and it's always been there as being a terrible source by any means. It's always been biased. It's always been a form of propaganda and manipulation of media and what people see. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that, especially being exposed, has been a wonderful thing. I've enjoyed it immensely because it's just pure entertainment. I'm like, ah, yes. What's today's story?
Yeah.
And
Right.
the Russia
Well,
and
it's
Ukraine and all these lies, and the Syria lie, the biggest lie of them all.
yeah.
It,
It's like a product. They have to sell it,
yes.
and they don't use the product, but they want other people to use it
Yep.
because you get these little what they call hot mics,
Yeah.
and there's one that came out. I think was it CNN?
Uh,
It was a hot mic for this anchor. She was talking about the Epstein,
Yeah, that was
uh, ex
ABC, ABC News.
ABC,
Mhm.
and she's like, "Oh yeah, he totally didn't kill himself," you know.
Yeah.
And she's talking about how 2 weeks prior, his cellmate attacked him
Mhm.
and put his hands around his neck, and that was a setup for the forced suicide.
Yep.
And it wasn't just one guard; it was two guards that supposedly fell asleep,
Right.
and and then there was like the
Yep.
CCTV
I was just gonna say.
cameras that
Right.
all went out. It's like, wow, all these things happen at once. What a coincidence. And
Oh man.
the thing, it's just the more, and here's something that a friend of mine told me. It's like, when the story creates more questions than answers,
Mhm.
it's a lie. It's not the
Absolutely.
truth.
And that,
Because the truth is like it answers all the questions even before they get asked. It's like, oh, you know,
right. That's kind of like, the whole, like, they love to class of everything as a conspiracy theory because it's an easy way to dismiss it, and that was, the
well, the
purpose of it.
CIA created that
Yes.
phrase.
Yes. And so, like, with the whole idea of a conspiracy theory, is that conspiracy is saying there is no evidence whatsoever to support something, so all you have to do is just throw that word out there like it's water, and people will say, oh, well, it's a conspiracy theory. No, a conspiracy has no evidence. you know there's no evidence
Yeah,
whatsoever, no questions, no doubt. It's just a conspiracy is just some left field thing somebody made up. And with the Epstein thing, that's not a conspiracy. I would say, if anything, it's a conspiracy within the government to commit a murder, depending on who you're
yeah.
looking at.
Well,
But
a
yeah.
conspiracy is anything where two or more people agree upon an illegal action. I mean, that's or to do something.
Right.
That's a conspiracy.
Right.
And to have evidence of a conspiracy or evidence that leads to or points to a conspiracy, it's not a theory. When you have evidence to support a
Right.
statement, it's not a theory.
Right.
That it's a fact. It's measurable, it's observable, it's repeatable.
Yeah.
Um, the uh, the melting point for steel is higher than the burn rate for kerosene. Therefore, kerosene cannot melt steel,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Like when you light kerosene, you
Yep.
cannot melt the steel. Okay. Airplanes use kerosene for fuel. This is a known fact.
Yeah.
Therefore, the the fuel for the airplanes could not have melted the steel that was in the buildings, the two towers of the World Trade Centers.
Right.
That's a fact. That's
Mhm.
not a conspiracy theory. That is a fact.
Yep.
And when the media says that the fuel for the airlines melted the steel, the steel core of those two buildings, that's a lie.
Yeah, there
And that's a
was.
conspiracy to commit fraud or to commit perjury,
Yes.
you know. That's the conspiracy right there.
Oh yeah.
You
Well,
know,
when you're misleading people with false information to cover up
right.
a bigger whatever that is, whether that is somebody brought the buildings down in a coordinated way because they wanted to protect the area in a sense or to protect their own assets, kind of like Building 7, which I believe, that was
Oh,
definitely brought
building
down.
7 was still standing when BBC
Yeah, I saw that.
was, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. It's like the building was standing right there.
Building
And
7
she's
went
saying,
down.
yeah, oh my God. It's like, wow, lady, you're reading the
Oh,
wrong script,
oh God.
you know?
I remember I watched that like several times over the years. I'm like, God, that's just, who did this? Like, who really screwed this up?
Yeah,
But obviously that
and it
information.
reminds me of that soccer player
Hmm.
that falls long after the fist has already swung, It's like, oh, okay, it's like the Jedi kick in
Right.
Return of the Jedi where Luke kicks and he misses the guy like about 2 feet and the guy goes flying. It's
Right.
like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, what was that? That was 9/11.
Right.
That was Building 7.
Building
And
7. That to me was like I really like looked into that. I remembered like there happened to be a couple whistleblowers that had come out and they mysteriously got ill and died.
yeah,
And but it was talking about the building, and I remember listening, to the condition of what the building was, what was inside before it fell, and
yeah,
it didn't make any sense, and it sounded completely coordinated. The fire department, information, the things that they were, of course, that got quiet as well, but there was just so much unanswered questions and behaviors and things that didn't make any sense, and I mean, it took a while for this stuff to come out, obviously, and that's why there was such a huge when it first came out. It was like this truth movement thing popped up, and of course,
yeah,
people were mislabeling it and calling it all this terrible shit because that's what you do when you get caught
yep,
lying, right? Committing perjury
right.
is a bitch. Um, so
That is.
there was just so much information that came out. I remember the architects for the 9/11 truth. They did a bunch of presentations. I know I got their name totally wrong, but the architects groups, that specific one though, that was very large, and they're still out there. They're still doing their thing, and they've been working with the
Hmm.
families to, you know, um, seek justice for them to open up. They reopened a case up, with law enforcement to get answers
Yeah,
recently, and I was like, thank God. It's one small victory, but it's better than nothing. And the fact that they want to forget about this so much that what is it? What's his name? Ron Stewart had to go up there, and you saw that with the Senate committee thing where he went and he was basically like yelling at them, like there was hardly anybody in that room, any senators to speak of. Let's put it that way. And
right.
and he was like, how can you forget these people that sacrificed their lives? There are people in this room dying still
Yeah,
from what happened there as first responders, and there was no money set aside for them, no funding. And you say never again, but here we are. And he got very passionate about it, and they did get the funding, but it was one of those things that he just went off on them, and it took that much. Just something as simple as having this one celebrity come up and say, "Listen, it's been all these years, and you guys are trying to pretend like it never happened." You
well,
know,
that's the thing. It didn't,
mm,
not the way that they're telling it.
right?
And you can't have your witnesses live,
Mhm. Mhm.
because there are first responders who said they heard multiple explosions,
Yes.
like squibs going off, boom, 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 boom.
Mhm.
And that's what brought down the buildings. It wasn't the airplanes that hit them, you know, all those stories up. It was all the multiple explosions that had been rigged in the buildings. And there's this one video where it actually shows puffs of smoke
Oh yeah.
as the building is going down, as the building is pancaking, which doesn't happen. It's like a building goes straight down because it loses its support from underneath it.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm. Now there's a part of me that one of the things I like again. I don't know how coordinated all that was. That's just my personal thing. But I will say this: I know that to as a preventative action, and this is what I've thought about, especially like Building 7, because that was coordinated to bring that building down before it went on its own. That's what I believe,
Hmm.
and they're just never going to acknowledge that for whatever insurance reasons or likewise. But the building was probably after these buildings had been hit, and the realization that they're not going to, for whatever reason, either not going to come down the way they want them to come down, or they realize that this is going to be deadlier if it does come down at an angle, like it would expect it to be honest with you. Um,
Right.
uh, that they coordinated the explosions and then just acted like the buildings collapsed in on themselves, but really it was to preserve the structure of the city, or better yet, to save other lives. But I don't know if that, once again, I'm not, a specialist, but
Well,
I wondered if
you,
that's what they were doing.
it's like the money. People say if you want to know what's going on, follow the money.
Mm,
You
mm-hmm.
have to look at the result.
Right.
What did we get at the end of 9/11?
Mm. Oh shit. Wars, wars, wars.
Exactly. And who's benefiting from those wars?
Yeah.
Okay. You look at all the support companies that are in there. Halliburton, uh, and who owned, who had who was part of Halliburton? Cheney.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look at, who's benefiting from what, and look at all the corporations that are now in Iraq and Afghanistan that wouldn't have been there
Mm-hmm.
had it not been for, 9/11.
That's
So
very
there's all
true.
these things that are there's all these people that are benefiting from this one event, and this event was packaged as something that it's not, and that was the product that they were trying to sell, and people bought it because they don't have the ability um, to really analyze things, to look at things critically.
Right.
They're just, it's a belief system. I mean, it's already there. It started with religion. You got to believe what we're telling you, because why would we lie? Lying is bad. So therefore, everything I'm telling you is the truth. Okay. And, it's like, well, daddy said it's true, therefore it must be true.
Yep.
And so now now the government is stepping and saying, well, why would we lie? It's all about God and country. And you notice, like, Bush was there and he led everyone in prayer, and it's like, oh, we're back in second grade. Let's say the Pledge of Allegiance, and you know, um, it's all a lie. It's just, but it's being presented as truth. And there was a movie that came out years ago. Uh, it's called Wag the Dog.
Yeah. Yeah. Dustin
Okay,
Hoffman. Mm-hmm.
Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro. It was all right there. They created this whole pageant, and you know, and but here's the thing: it's like, why would anyone go to such lengths to sell us on a lie? Why would they do this? It makes no sense.
Right.
And that's the one argument that comes up. Why would they do it? Well, we don't know why, because we can't see what they're after. It's
Mm-hmm.
not until after they get what they wanted, then we go, that's what they were after.
Right.
But until we see that, it's like, well, why would they? That makes no sense. Of course, it doesn't make any sense. Why is China um, turning Hong Kong into Vietnam of 1970, or the 60s?
Right.
Why is it turning Hong Kong into a battlefield? Because it wants to destroy the economy of Hong Kong. Why
Right.
do they want to destroy the economy of Hong Kong? They want to destroy the American dollar,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all tied in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, China is waging a war that thinks it can win, because it's not a conventional war. If they got into a conventional war with America, we would hand them their ass in pieces.
Oh yeah.
Their military is not strong enough. They have numbers, But when you have technology, your numbers don't count for crap.
Absolutely.
Um, when you have technology, you just send your missiles and your drones in, and you just pancake every major city, every major installation. And then you say, are you done yet? Have you had enough? Would you like some more? That's what China wants to avoid. And no one's going to push the button because there's not going to be a world left to dominate
Yep.
with nuclear weapons. So there's no threat there unless you get some psycho, living in a cave that gets a hold of that. And that's not going to happen because they're all on the CIA payroll
Yep.
or someone's payroll. So the dogs of war are not going to be set loose because it's a losing battle. You can't have war. You can only have incursions. And that's exactly what we have. It's not a war in Afghanistan. There's no war in Iraq. There's no war in Syria. This is just an exercise, a military exercise.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Now, for the people that are actually experiencing this, they're getting shot at. For them, it's war. But
Right.
they don't know what war is because war kills everybody.
Right.
You know, World War II killed everybody.
Oh
World
yeah.
War One killed everybody. Civil War killed everybody. Vietnam, some people died. Afghanistan, Korea, quite a few people died. But these are not wars. These are not even close to war, you
Right.
know. Um, and the thing is, though, this is an ongoing exercise to
Mm-hmm.
keep the machine running. And this is something that President Eisenhower warned people about. It was the military-industrial complex.
Yes.
That's who's benefiting. Why did we have 9/11? Because the military-industrial complex needed to make more machines. They needed to make more weapons.
Yep.
And how do you make more weapons? Well, you create a need to make more weapons. Well, how do you create a need to make more weapons? Well, you create a war. Well, how do you create a war? Well, you give the people a reason to get into that war. Well, what do? You have Pearl Harbor.
Yep.
You have 9/11.
Yeah, the Gulf
You
of
have the
Tonkin.
the Tonkin Bay. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. There you go. So you have to get the people on the side of right,
Yes.
and right is whatever doctrine we're selling today. You
Yeah.
know,
And that's the scary
and
part is the manipulation that's gone into all of this
but
maneuvering.
people don't want to believe this to be true because the foundation of their reality is built upon the government would never do this.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that scares the shit out of them
Not questioning
because they
authority. You know.
yeah, oh my God, the moment you realize that your parents are fallible, that's a scary time. You realize, oh crap,
Mm-hmm.
what if they're wrong about what they told me here? What if, well, that's something that you need to find out on your own. And that's called growing up.
Absolutely. Because that's once again, it's about learning from the mistakes. Like it's a phrase my grandmother said is, don't learn from my successes, learn from my failures.
Yeah.
And that way you can grow and you can hopefully be better, and do better for yourself, but also understand, that's why that's so important, I think, to have voices of, the past and to listen to history and to understand that history and to understand how we got to where we're at. Because this
Mm-hmm.
bullshit about, and do I believe that we have climate change? Yeah, I go outside, I see it. However, it's not a carbon tax that's going to get rid of it, you know?
Right.
So it's a selling point for a bigger agenda. You know, I believe that very strongly. The globalism push has been tremendous, and they're going out of their way to just scare the living hell out of everybody with this crap. Um,
Well, that's the plan.
yes,
They want people to be scared. They want people to be destabilized because when your enemy, and that's exactly what the people of America are to the people in the government, they are the enemy.
hmm,
You have to keep your enemy off balance, therefore they can't attack you,
right. That's why you
you
start things
know,
such as
and you keep them distracted. It's the red flag in front of the bull.
right. This
Where do
call,
you want the bull to go? Put the flag there.
right. It's the culture war. That's the culture war has been a perfect what do you call it,
Oh,
distraction, you know.
the culture war began a long time ago
Mhm.
when they realized that sports was addicting to people. When
Colosseum.
they realized that beer, yeah, exactly. It's Rome,
Mhm.
the gladiators. You have to keep the you have to keep them pacified and you have to keep them off balance
Mhm.
because that way they can't see your faults.
Yeah.
They don't have time to. They're too busy worrying about this or arguing about that. I mean, I wish I had $1 for every time I heard people arguing about which team was better, which player was a faster runner, or which one had the best stat. Who
Right.
gives a shit?
It's a
How is that going to put food on your table? How is that going to benefit you as a person?
and all of it
It's a
is filler.
distraction.
Exactly. It's filler. It's filler. It's trying it's also taking away that natural tendency to like we were going back to fight or flight. So
Hmm.
like the Roman times, they'd have their gladiators out there killing and being killed and whatever, and people just that they would get that adrenaline push that they would do by nature outside of the Colosseum, just living life, maybe protecting their family or their home from invaders, or natural instincts of just being a human being are now being funneled into an entertainment to keep them passe, keep them happy, and very content with their opiates.
People have to feel like they're winning.
Right.
As long as you have them under the illusion that they're winning something, that they're gaining,
Correct.
then they're okay. But the moment where they realize that they're constantly in a losing battle,
Right.
there's nothing more dangerous than a person who has nothing to lose.
Oh yeah. Like
And
I love
that's,
what is it? Jerry
yeah,
Salente. Jerry Salente, the economist, forecaster, trends forecaster. He's like, when
okay.
people lose everything, they lose it, and
Yeah.
and we've seen it,
Well, that
already.
was the guy that drove his plane into the IRS building.
Yeah, yeah. That. Oh
That
my
was a man
God.
who had nothing to lose because it had all been taken away from him and there was no logic. His
Yeah.
world had become insane. It's like, this is insanity.
It's back.
And so he literally drove his plane into the IRS building. And that's when the IRS changed its policies and became nicer to people over the phone. They stopped threatening them.
Yeah, I've noticed that. And the
And
thing is like when people like, especially after the mortgage crisis hit, and so many people were losing their homes and having illegal foreclosures being forced on them.
yeah,
Chase and Wells Fargo and Countrywide being some of the biggest assholes on this planet. Um,
Countrywide is now merged with B of A.
yes, they were doing that at the time too, and so it's like B of A is just Countrywide, baby,
Yeah,
or Countrywide's rather the baby now, but it's gone. And I worked
yeah.
I
I
worked
was there when they did that,
I
when they
worked at
made that merger.
I worked for Countrywide for a
I
while.
worked for Bank of America.
Yes, we know the bullshit. Um,
Yep.
so much
Yeah.
bullshit. And I went to Chase for a little bit, and I worked in their HELOC department. And their practices there were absolutely predatory and wrong. That's
Yeah.
why I didn't last there. I did not last there with the shit, primarily
Same
because
thing with Bank of America, the
so.
credit cards.
Oh
Oh
my
man.
God. And they were targeting certain lenders. For us, it was like people who already had their first with Chase. They were targeting them for a second, and they were mostly people on very strict incomes, usually elderly folks, right? So they're trying to get them into a HELOC, which would take everything out of proportion, like their interest rates. You know how it was. HELOCs were just
Hmm.
the devil, piggyback loans, all that crap, and arms, of course. But they were in these HELOCs, and they were trying to push these on these people who didn't have that. Their debt ratio was way too high. There was no way, and they wanted us to basically, in my opinion, based on everything they were telling us to do and based on our training, was to basically manipulate the books a bit. And
Hmm.
that's really what they were doing without saying it. And I was like, this is predatory lending. You're targeting specific groups that, especially elderly, are on fixed income, Social Security, disability,
Yep.
and that's what they were doing. And it pissed me the fuck off. I was like, I'm not doing this. And I ended up, it was one of those things: either you quit or we fire you. I'm like, it looks like I'm quitting because I wasn't
Well,
gonna
they
sell.
changed the interest. They changed the payment method
Mm-hmm.
for credit cards, and they put the blame on the Bush administration at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "Oh well, the Bush administration says we need to get these people to pay off their credit." And it's like, I've never heard that.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything about that on the outside. We
Mhm.
heard it on the inside. It's like, and why does Bush care about how people pay off their credit cards? You know,
Right.
and so we went from, um, I think it was paying off your, your, oh, what was it? It's been so long now. It's like I can't remember what it was, but it was like your, uh, it was like a minimum payment.
Oh, okay.
I think it was like 10% plus your fees and finance charges. That's what it was.
Okay.
So it's like 10% and or it's $10. I think it was $10 and your fees and finance charges was minimum payment.
Okay.
And then they changed it to 1% of your balance plus fees and finance charges.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
like, that's
So
curious.
so then you've got these people that, like this one call that I got, this lady was on a fixed income. It's like, I don't know how to pay for this. And it got so bad that they actually had to create a whole other department to handle those calls. And I forget the name of the department that they created, but
Some kind of
it was
retention.
basically, yeah, it's just people that we just, okay, let me put you on hold and I'll direct your call to this department who can handle your questions.
God.
And so they created a whole other problem. And that was about the time that they merged with, what was it, this other credit card company. Um, and it wasn't NWA, but it was something like that, NBNA.
Okay.
NBNA already had like all these credit card services and programs. And so they were quote unquote merging with B of A. But the thing is, though, B of A had to change um, all of their programs, all of their software.
Mhm.
So we had two programs that we were working with. There was TSIS, which was a MS DOS based program, and then we had Frontier, which was a web based program. We bounced back and forth and have handling. But when they changed the payment process for the credit card, it just turned everything upside down. And then people were getting into bigger problems with their credit cards, so we were putting them into penalty pricing. So basically, if your APR was like 7% or whatever, suddenly you were at like 15%.
God.
Yeah,
My God.
and then it would stay that way for like 6 months, and we had to see evidence that you were making steady payments on your credit card. And then once that 6 months time was up and you had been um, a good customer. And a
Mhm.
good customer, by the way, is not someone who pays off their credit card um, all in one shot. A good customer is someone who uses their credit card and then makes minimum payments. So basically, it just keeps you in debt for the rest of your life.
Right.
That's a good customer.
Right.
Um,
And that's the trap of credit. I mean, credit is
if you don't use your credit card for a certain period of time, they'll put you into penalty pricing. So
see,
whenever you make a charge on your card, you're automatically at 15% or whatever that penalty
Jesus
is.
Christ, man.
And it's the minimum amount or it's the maximum amount that they can charge you as an interest rate that the government will allow.
God.
I think it's up to 19%. I'm not sure. It's been a while,
Yeah.
but it's up there. It's not 7%. It's not 10%. I mean, the best deal you're going to get is a fixed rate that's
Yeah.
not based on prime. Prime is always going to be going up and down.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you'll have, okay, well, this is your interest rate plus prime. So maybe you'll have a deal that's like, okay, I've got 5% interest rate, which is great.
Right.
But if you add that to prime, prime could be at 7.9.
Right.
So, you have
God.
to be careful. And they sneak this stuff in.
Oh yeah.
You have to read the contract that says, okay, you'll have this up until such and such date or whatever. They'll sneak this stuff in. And
Mhm.
they're really crafty. They've got really good lawyers that write these contracts.
Oh yeah. Because they want to make that cash money,
And
man.
Oh
Evil.
yeah, and
So
that's what it
freaking
is.
evil, man.
But that's a good customer to the credit card companies,
Mm,
to Bank of America, Wells Fargo, all these banks. A good customer is a paying customer, and if you pay for the rest of your life, you're great. They hate the clients that, okay, I'm gonna spend this money and I want to pay it all off, and then I'll be okay, and then I'll just use my cards for emergency.
right.
Well, that emergency card is going to have the highest APR that the federal law will allow when you start using it.
And that's this shitty part because I used to not be the case back in the day where you could have that card
Well,
available
it was
whenever.
Bank of America was started by an Italian immigrant that when the San Francisco earthquake hit, he would give loans out on a handshake, and he knew that you would be able to pay off your loan if your hands had calluses, which means you worked hard.
Right.
If your hand didn't have calluses, he wouldn't give you a loan. But he would basically, like, if you once you shook his hand, he would know, okay, I can trust you.
God, things have changed so tremendously. We've
They
dehumanized it,
have.
you know?
Well, it's living in the big city. We're cut off from nature. We're cut off from the law of the land. We're cut
Mm-hmm.
off from reality, how life really works.
Right.
We see these nature videos and we go, "Oh, that's terrible. Like nature's evil." No, nature
No.
is nature.
Right.
We've made it evil.
We have made things into, oh no, it's not safe. Well, yeah, by nature the world is not safe. That's the way of the world. I mean, no matter where you
Yeah.
go, there's going to be dangers, whether it be human or otherwise. You know?
Well, that's what they try to show people in Madagascar, the cartoon for
Yes.
kids,
Right.
is that you had these zoo animals who've been kept in a zoo and they were dreaming of being free and out in the open, and that's people. That's people in church, that's people in school, that's people in that are voting. They're
Right.
the zoo animals, and then they get outside the zoo, and all of a sudden they see that the zoo is actually a better place
Right.
because they went to Madagascar, and they see these cute little animals, and all of a sudden some terrible predator comes along and eats them,
Right.
and they're horrified because
Mhm.
they've been given steaks, and they've been given all this food, but they don't see where it comes from.
Right.
And that's people.
There,
People that live in a city are living in a zoo.
yeah. And there's this the intellectualism, uh, uh, which drives me a little absolutely nuts. Is this illusion? And I've heard this before, but the one that sticks out, and I've referenced it a couple of times. But it's with Penn Jillette. He was doing a one-on-one interview with
Oh.
Joe Rogan, and I'm not
Uh-huh.
I'm not a huge fan of Penn Jillette, but I appreciate he thinks, thank God, at least he does think, and he has critical
Yeah.
thinking, and he does look at things objectively to some greater extent. But he had said this comment about how he thinks that human beings have outgrown war, and
Yeah.
I laughed, and I was like,
Oh,
okay. He
wow.
believes physical war. Now he thinks the war is going to translate into more of a digital, technology base. Well, that's been there forever, but physical war will always be there, my friend. That is just the way of human beings. So the intellectual naivety that comes from that statement pissed me off.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, you cannot live in a reality like this. It's that bubble you're speaking about, that, zoo animal thinking. It doesn't work that way in the world. There will always be strife. There will always be forms of violence. And if you're not prepared, I'm not saying, tomorrow I expect a full crazy, war out my backyard, but if it did
Yeah.
happen, I sure as hell wouldn't be sitting around going, well, maybe they'll go away. I'm not going to live in that
Yeah.
reality. That I know that human
That's
nature is not that way.
yeah.
I mean,
That's the adolescent,
yes.
the intellect.
It,
It's the adolescent mentality where that says, "Well, I think, therefore I am."
yeah.
Okay, that's not what it is, but it's a part of it.
Yeah.
It's a piece, but it's not the whole thing,
Right. And it was
and
shocking to
it's
me in a
like
sense.
stairs. The
Mhm.
higher you go, the more you see.
Right.
You
And
can't stay on the second or third stair and expect that everything you see is everything that's there to be seen. You have to go higher.
right. And it's
But
just
the trap with the intellect is they think that they've got it all figured out.
yeah. And
you
they've,
know.
they've usually in the wars they're the first to go. So I mean, they need to be very wary about what tracks that they're laying before them when they start getting into the, well, we've outgrown this, or I won't take someone seriously if they do X, Y, and Z. That type of thing, a very judgmental and egocentric
If
behavior.
we've outgrown war as a society, then
Yeah,
there would be no road rage.
right. There wouldn't be acts of
Um,
violence or passion at all. Like there,
right.
I'm like, I just kind of sat there and went, I laughed. I was like, this guy here. I understand what he was going for, but it's not, that wasn't very thoughtful in the context of that's what the bubble thinks, especially a Hollywood bubble. But
Yeah.
in the real reality of the world, like there are children who cannot walk to school without the parent being there in some neighborhoods because of predatory behavior of, I don't know, bigger animals in the jungle.
Yeah.
So, uh,
Basically.
so if you're telling me that we've outgrown physical war, you're telling us that we've also outgrown our basic survival instincts to exist or inhabit a certain area or location. We wouldn't need to
Well,
put up a
it's
wall because of cartels,
looking looking for something better. Well, the walls work both ways.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, walls keep people out, but they also keep people in, which concerns me.
Yeah. Mhm.
Once you start putting up walls, you've basically built a prison,
Right. Yeah. Well, like
and
it's like Israel.
we're not going to. Yeah. Oh my God.
Mhm.
Don't get me started
Yeah.
on that because
Sorry.
I'm gonna piss off a lot of people. But the thing is, though, the wall is not going to keep the cartels out because they have tunnels where they can drive a semi truck under.
Right.
Um, this is only a superficial fix, you know.
Right.
And the thing about government funding is that anything that the government funds, the money that is supposed to go to that project gets siphoned off into other areas.
Right.
So that's just the way it works. So anytime any president, any official asks for money, whatever it is that they're asking for, the money is not going to go to that project.
Right.
In fact, is they go to the lowest bidder and they get it done for cost. And they say, well, it cost, $10 billion. No, it didn't. You know,
Mhm.
it didn't cost any more than what McDonald's paid for their burger meat and then turned around and sold to the public.
Right.
They always sell it at a higher cost than what they paid for. That's how they make a profit.
Right.
Any government project, it's the same thing. What they say they spent on that project is not the money that was spent on the project.
Right.
And
So.
so that's when I start asking questions like, why do we need a wall? You know,
Mhm.
we don't need the wall. They need the wall
Right.
because they need the money that they're going to get for the wall.
Mhm.
And that's what it's all about. It's all about the money. And where is that money going to go? We don't know. You know, is it,
It'll be curious to see what pops off during this time that this funding is going on for the border, okay? But there's so much stuff going on in Mexico. That's like a whole nother story. It's been going on for freaking ever. So it's
it
just
is.
it's interesting that now all it's positioning. It's just a question of where that's going to go. The China has quite a bit of influence in Mexico, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what that will, what exactly the United States is positioning with using the cartels as an excuse, because these cartels run the damn government at this point. You know,
Well, the cartels are the government.
right,
And it's the same thing with the Hong Kong police. They're so saturated with the triads. Basically, when you become a cop in Hong Kong, you inadvertently become a triad member.
mm,
If you don't want to be a part of the triad, don't become a cop.
right,
And that's just the way it is. And that's what we're seeing on these videos. We're seeing triad tactics in uniforms.
right,
People are just being beat indiscriminately now. And they have to shout out the names to other people so they don't get lost in the system. If no one knows your name, then they can't find you.
And that's the scariest thing over there. I mean, there's so many things that are frightening right now in China, especially when they
Well, this
roll.
is the potential of any government, even
Absolutely,
ours.
absolutely.
And
Oh, it's a
this is why
warning,
we have guns.
right? And it's a warning. I mean, this is the fact is China's always been, this way. It's just gotten worse, meaning they've
Yeah,
started to expand. That's all.
but
And
here's the thing.
hmm,
None of those people are armed.
oh yeah, exactly. Oh
None of
yeah,
them.
that was well, the guns were taken well before Mao, right, or under Mao.
Um, I think so. I'm not sure.
The
Uh,
transition is foggy about that to me. I don't know when that started, but I know that Mao made it a point. you know.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, like it's the social credit system, that citizen credit system that they have.
Oh my God, that's scary.
That frightened me quite a bit because I follow journalists at the time. But this is before, okay, it actually quote got officially announced. They were targeting journalists a little bit with it, and the social credit system was actually on lockdown. And by the time that these journalists that I had been following, all of a sudden they were gone, and
Hmm.
they weren't able to communicate outside. They were explaining that their phones were now being tapped. People stopped talking to them because it'll raise or lower scores of your neighbors. It's all about guilt by association, and
Yeah.
it was so frightening in that sense that they were being locked down in such a way, and then it was announced. So it was like this very slow moving accident of having all this inside information in coming out of China to none at all, you know
Hmm.
and the stuff going on in Hong Kong is to just, I guess, seal the lid on the country. If
Yeah.
they can do that, which I hate to say this, but it's very possible they will. I mean, the international community has failed to do a damn thing about communism to begin with, and they're.
I had a really interesting experience when I was in Hong Kong. Well, actually, when I was in China,
Mm,
there was a documentary on China and how when Mao came to power and all this and that. And during the documentary, there was like about 10-15 minutes where they blocked it out. So
oh,
all you saw was like a pretty picture. When I went to Hong Kong, I saw the same exact documentary, but I saw the 15 minutes that had been edited out. And it was all about all the mistakes that the Mao administration had made
oh,
and the fact that Stalin refused to give financial aid to Mao. So Mao and his cohorts asked themselves, well, should we become socialist? And that's when communism failed in China, is when Stalin refused to support the Chinese government.
Jesus.
And so then it became socialist from that moment forward, or they talked about the idea of socialism. But that's when communism failed, is when they realized that, oh, we're on our own, we're screwed. So we have to do this by ourselves.
And it's just
And
it's
yeah,
it's gotten really just. I mean, it's been bad a while, but it's I know the differences now. Like, I know we're gonna start wrapping up here in a few minutes,
okay.
but the what okay for those who are listening, we have a problem here in this country where people are on board with socialism, believing that this is the ultimate system to fix all things. And what would be your opinion, which I have a feeling I already know, but I'm asking, is what is the difference between socialism and communism?
um, well, if you look at the pure essence of communism, it's completely different from the way it's expressed.
Mm-hmm.
But communism is basically everyone working together for the same dream.
Mm-hmm.
Socialism is basically the government is going to take care of everything. You don't have to worry about it. You just have to give half your earnings, to the system.
Mm-hmm.
But in communism, nobody owns anything,
Right.
ideally. Now, the way it's been corrupted is something completely different.
Right.
And communism is nothing more than a fascist state that dictates to you uh, who you're going to talk to, what you're going to say, um, and how you think. It's 1984, basically.
Yeah.
Socialism, it's actually it's really hard to tell the difference between the two anymore.
Yeah. It's kind of like they
Um,
become a hybrid in a sense now.
well, they've become one of the same thing.
Mhm.
And this is the thing, is like as you become more extreme, you become closer to the thing that you're opposed to.
Right.
And that's socialism and communism. All these isms,
Yeah. Right.
they're all the same.
Mhm.
Ideally, potentially, they become the same thing. You know, the fascists were against the communists were against the fascists. What was the difference, really?
Right. They all
There
kind
was
of
no
blended.
difference.
Exactly.
Right. And fascism is socialism. And this is the thing. The Nazi Party were socialists.
Yeah.
And it was all about the government will take care of you. Give us your guns, because that's what they did. They took their guns
Mhm.
and then they took their freedoms.
Yep.
You can't take people's freedoms until you've taken their guns.
If they
And
can't
that's just
defend
the way
their
it
if they
works.
can't defend their freedoms, because words don't
They,
work in many
right.
cases. They really don't, especially if you are operating with a particular government that is already censoring what your speech is.
Yeah.
You
And these
know.
media shills that are out here trying to sell people, all these so-called actors that are coming out and saying, "Oh, you know, you need to give up your guns," and this and that. These are nothing more than paid shills.
Well, they're jesters for the court.
Right. But the thing is, though, they don't get to work unless they read the scripts that they're given.
Bingo.
And that's it. They're actors. They're reading scripts. None of these people have an original idea of their own.
No, no, you're right. You're absolutely right, and I don't think a lot of people understand that, or they just kind of follow the I guess the swarm instead
The
of
momentum,
yeah,
yeah.
they really do not think twice about it, and they follow so quickly without questioning that authority or questioning whoever the hell this person's speaking.
And
Um,
that's the problem. They're not questioning.
and that's sad. It's so
Yeah.
sad. Um, at the end of an interview I do with everyone, Stig actually was the one that suggested this a while ago when we did his, and since then I've had others that I've done it with. But the end of the interview, I don't know if you've ever seen the show Inside the Actor's Studio. Um,
Oh, yeah.
okay, so these are the pivot questions that are asked at the end. It's the 10 questions, and
Okay, cool.
I think they're fun. They're it's a cool way to like people to kind of get more insight into that if they haven't already. Um, but
Right.
it's always fun to hear what different answers are, and it's funny because there is one in here that I always have to preface with "Let me finish the question," but because it
Okay.
because it starts out what turns you on, and I was like, wait, no. So, but the first question is, what is your favorite word?
My favorite word.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And it can
truth.
okay. And what is your least favorite word?
Lies.
What is it?
Lies.
Rise? Oh my.
Lies. Lies.
Lies.
It's just like falsehoods,
Mm.
deception. But I think beyond that would be the word belief.
Mm. Right.
Yeah.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a deep one.
Um, yeah, because all three of those are different. Uh, that's like three questions in one.
Yeah, in a sense.
Um,
But it's like,
I mean,
what's the
so
first
what was the
thing?
first one?
Create
Uh,
creatively.
creatively, music.
Okay. And what music
Music
genre?
really inspires me.
What music genre is yours?
It could be anything,
Mm.
really. It's like different muses that come in,
Mm-hmm.
and based on what I'm doing creatively, the music has to fit that.
Right.
It has to support that. Um, so yeah, I would say music is a thing that really inspires me creatively,
Mm-hmm.
and that's different from the other two that you gave me.
Well, what turns you on spiritually then? We'll go down the other two.
Truth,
Okay.
uh, on a spiritual level, when someone's speaking their truth, I get excited. I'm like, wow, they're
Right.
really connected.
Right.
Um, when they start talking about what they believe or what they think, it's like, oh, okay, that's nice,
Right.
you know.
It's very different.
But when, yeah, it's a different vibe completely.
And
So
emotionally, that's the third.
emotionally, emotionally, it kind of touches on truth, but it's like when someone is really there, presence,
Mhm. Mhm.
when they're present, I'm emotionally turned on. It's like, yeah, that's that, it's a form of truth.
Right.
It's a form of reality is that I'm here, you know.
Exactly. It's the presence of intent is there, and it's like,
Hmm.
they're here, they're present. That's great, you know. 'Cause so many people are
Yeah.
not present. They're
Well, I
there.
broke up with a girl because I could feel that she wasn't really into the relationship. I said, you don't want this relationship. And her jaw dropped. Like she's like, and it's that face, she made that face that people make when they get caught.
Right.
Like,
Can't hand in
it's
the
like,
cookie jar.
yeah. And she couldn't get how I got that, you know.
Mhm.
And all she did was answer a question. All I did was ask how she felt. And the
Oh.
way she answered it, it's like, hey, how you feeling? Or how you doing? Or something like that. And the way she answered, I was like, you don't want this relationship, do you? And she literally had nothing to say. She had nothing.
Oh. But
And I was like,
oh, well, there's your answer. You're like,
yeah.
oh,
Well,
awesome.
I had hit a point where it's like, I'd rather be alone than be with the wrong person for myself,
Right.
you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
And that's the worst thing you can do is be with the wrong person because then you don't get that presence.
Yeah, and there's no connection there, and it kind of
Yeah.
you go for you end up finding yourself going elsewhere to fulfill that.
Mm.
Not so much cheating as it is just trying to fill that void because you're like,
Well, every day is cheating because you're really not with that who that person is.
right,
You're with someone else.
right, right,
And that's you cheating on yourself by being with that person and trying to convince yourself that you're with that person. You're
mm-hmm,
not.
right,
You're with the person that you want to believe that you're with. And again, that word belief,
mm-hmm,
you know, and you can believe anything you want. It doesn't make it true.
right,
It doesn't make it real.
right.
And that's the lie. And if you look at the word belief, there's the word lie right in the middle of it.
Oh yeah,
B lie
mm-hmm.
F.
So then, what turns you off?
um Insincerity.
Mm. What is your favorite word?
Um I think I didn't I answer the truth.
Okay, so truth. Oh, I'm sorry. I did a. I had a.
That's okay.
There's an edit for me. Jesus. I went back and what it is what is your favorite curse word?
Oh,
Mm,
crap.
crap's a nice one.
I think that's my favorite because I use that a lot. Like crap.
Yep.
I'll slip and I'll use words. I'll say words and then it's like I don't like that word, but
Right.
it's what the moment called for.
Right.
And and it's like I don't like that word, but that was the moment and I don't like that moment, but that's what it called for. But I think crap is like because you can use it for so many things.
Oh yeah. It's a very versatile word too. It's
It
like
is.
fits all opportunities.
Yeah, it is.
What sound or noise do you love?
Oh wow. Sound or noise do I love? Um, Thunder
Mm,
is my favorite. Thunder. I love thunder.
I like the distant thunder. That's my
Oh, I
favorite.
like it when it's right up on top. Just when you're in the middle of it
Oh man.
and you get that adrenaline surge, like your whole body just breaks out into a sweat.
Mhm.
I love that feeling because it's like you're alive.
Yeah.
you know?
I'm that person that like dodges and ducks when there's thunder. So yeah, when I hear thunder, I'm like, oh god, and I do it by I can't help it. I'll just react. Like I'll I'll
Yeah,
dodge or duck like especially if I'm outside. But yeah,
right.
a lot of people like the sounds of rain or thunder or the wind. Through the
Yeah,
trees. Like it's usually when there's some rain coming in, that feeling. You know.
yeah. I love the sounds of storms in general, like, when you have the wind and stuff. And then ocean waves are another favorite, but
Yeah.
the one I love the most is thunder.
That's interesting. That's interesting because everyone like most people would be like, "Oh, I'm scared of thunder," or react negatively. But hey, man, to each their own. Everyone's got something with nature,
Yeah,
that clicks with them. So what?
yeah. Wolves howling is another one.
Oh yeah,
I could sit there and listen to them for hours.
they're talking.
You know.
They're
Yeah,
they're coordinating.
they are. Yep, yep.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Um, it's uh, I would say, okay, the way people sing in country music, or the best way to say it is the sound of ignorance.
Yeah,
When people are talking or when they're singing and they sound ignorant,
yeah,
the sound of ignorance, that is probably the most annoying sound for me.
yeah. Kind of like it feels
Yeah.
like you're being dumbed down without even being dumbed down. It's like,
I can literally, like, if I'm listening to country, I can literally watch my IQ dropping. And it's like,
uh,
oh my God, I gotta get out of here.
yeah, I don't like.
Please
Yeah,
turn off the music.
I'm the
It's
same
just,
way. I don't like it. Mm-mm,
yeah.
mm-mm,
And a lot of the so-called rap today,
mm.
oh my God, that's like, ugh, I don't know which is worse, but they all contain the sound of ignorance.
Yeah, when things.
And
Yeah,
yeah, I just
I agree. I don't like that. I don't like the way it sounds. It makes it
the
just.
dude does not abide. It's just like,
Okay, so what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
mm.
Yeah, right.
Oh my God. The first thing that popped in my mind was a sniper.
Oh my! You're like, well, just fix in this war.
Um, it just is, you know what? We could have peace with just one bullet.
Exactly.
Um, I think, well, I mean, I don't think I'd love that job though,
Right.
because, the horror of taking someone else's life, it's not something that I would actively seek out.
Right.
If it happened, it's like, well, you know, this is the situation and there was no way out of it.
Right.
Um, I think the job that I would love is feeding people
Mm.
who don't have anything.
Right.
I think, I mean, that job would feel so good every day
Yeah.
because the look in people's eyes when they're getting something that they don't think that they would get is just amazing. Um, and that's something that I love to do when people come over. It's like I'll cook for them or whatever.
Yeah.
And
That's a
just
it's a way of giving love in a sense, you
it
know.
is it is love.
Mhm.
You're giving from a place of love, but for me, it's giving out of a place of truth because this is what this is really all about. We're here for each other. We need to be here
Mhm.
for each other, and if we're not, we're living the wrong life.
Right. Absolutely. Now,
Yeah.
what profession would you not like to do?
Mm, politician.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
the last question is if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oh,
Mhm.
there's so many things running through my mind, but I think the main thing is like, are you ready for the next level?
Are you ready to level up?
Yeah, you ready for the next level? That would be it.
What a great way to go in, though. I'd be like, ooh, game on,
Yeah,
right? Um,
yeah.
but I want to thank you though so much for hanging out and chatting. We talked quite a bit, but I'm so glad that we were able to like sit down and get the conversation going and being able to chat and stuff. And because we chatted quite a bit before I recorded, so I was like, well, I'm gonna miss all this stuff because we were talking about cool stuff, and I was like,
Yeah.
sometimes it's just having a
It was a warm
conversation.
up.
Yeah, exactly. We're just warming up to the pitch. It was good.
Yeah.
But tell people where they can find you again. Best places to find you, and anything you might have coming up.
Well, I've got a few things coming up. Well, first, you can find me on Twitter, Roger Larson, 1970.
Okay.
And then on YouTube, you can find me under Iron Wolf 1970.
Mm,
Um, you'll see the same logo, so don't be confused.
right.
Um, it's the Howling Wolf. Um, I've got a few things coming. I'm working on a couple of videos. One is actually it's so far people have seen it as a starship taking off, but there's going to be an audio clip uh, fixed to it, and it's actually going to be a lot deeper than what people anticipate it to be. Without giving too much away, I want it to be a surprise.
Mhm. Mhm.
The other one is basically a very involved video of what I call the four corners of grounding, center, balance, on a line, and
Nice.
it's going to go in depth with those four things, and it's going to explain a lot more about what they mean and what it is. So that's something I've been working on for some time. Looking forward to finishing up my story of dystopia, which is my Twitter story
Mhm.
that I have. It's a pinned tweet. I've got, I think, 5 chapters or 6 chapters so far, and I think it's going to be like a 10 or 12 chapter story. I'm
Okay.
not sure, but it's really intense.
And you can.
And it's basically a journey that takes you through the evolution of a society and then its demise, how it basically kind of destroys itself, and then what happens after.
It's really cool. I think I like the idea of doing Twitter stories like that. It's one way, especially to put out like creative content
Hmm.
that, and it's immediate. That means more eyes will see it. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, check out Iron Wolf's
Oh, I've got another
stuff.
story I'm working on too.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh. Okay. Uh,
This goes back to 2017. I created an RPG map
oh.
of this fantasy world, and it's elves, dwarves, humans,
Oh.
and then I got into the backstory of the beings that created this world, and that has consumed me for the last 2 years, and I'm starting to get back into it.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
So
That,
yeah, that's I've got 7 pages completed, which is they're longer pages than the Twitter pages.
okay.
Um, but yeah, each page really covers in depth what create helped to create this world. So it's that one's gonna be fun to post.
Yeah. I'm like
Yeah,
I'm all for that because I'm like that's my genre right there.
yeah. Well,
But
that's what I kind of got started on. When I was 13, I started reading Tolkien,
mm, yep.
and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then later on, I got into sci-fi, but I've always been more into fantasy because you can do so much more with it. You've got magic.
Right.
Um, and in magic, there's rules, but they're not as restrictive as, let's say, science, you know, where you have, technology. There's only certain things you can do. I mean, now we're getting to quantum physics,
Right.
which is basically magic, you know.
Right.
Um, because magic is basically anything that you can't really understand, so you just call it magic. But
Right.
within that context, there's rules, there's structure, there's places that you can go safely, and
Mhm.
there's other places where you're at risk. And yeah, but I've always loved fantasy because, well, dragons. you know,
Yeah. Well, yeah,
and wizards and whatnot.
there's a beautiful mythology to it. You can build
Hmm.
mythologies, you can build legends. It's just it's
Yeah,
endless, and I think that's what's
right.
so. To me, I've always loved that. You know, I've always loved like the swashbuckling and the
Oh
adventure and
yeah,
stuff like that. And sci-fi was just to me, it was just another place for adventure and swashbuckling. That's all.
yeah,
It's the new ocean.
yeah.
So it's
And I
like,
think that's what Lucas touched on. He combined the two.
mm-hmm,
He
absolutely,
created a space fantasy where it's like you have, technology, but you also have mysticism. I won't call it magic,
right.
but you have a mystical presence to it, which is why I wasn't really big on the midichlorians. Like, oh my God, he turned it into us. It's now a science project. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay. You know,
it just you have to. It's a space fairy tale, and
yeah,
at the same time, it can go in many directions of dramatics and the human nature, but at the same time, you can still have that mysticism. And I think the meaning of life isn't always scientific necessarily, or at least not
mm,
human science. Um, I think it has more mysticism than we like to give credit for, you know.
yeah,
And that's the best part is the truth lies and also the mysticism. And
yeah. I mean, there's the science to spirituality,
absolutely, yep,
but it's not the same science that you
right,
have in the intellectual
yeah,
sense.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think people like Carl Sagan and I'm going to use him as an example. He understood this to some extent.
Hmm.
He understood that there is a mysticism there. Even though, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff to be explained, there was still a lot of stuff that's not. And it had more of a
Right.
agnostic, not necessarily, my opinion is he was much more agnostic than he was an atheist. He just didn't
Hmm.
buy into the religion. And he believed that, there was much more, and the truth lies out in this grand universe that we don't have answers and questions. We have more questions than answers, but that's okay because that's the
Yeah.
mysticism of the unknown. And
Hmm.
even when we think we've explained it in human terms, we're still limited by our own brains. That's the way it goes.
Yeah. Well, we're limited by our own experiences,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
because the more we experience, the more that we have the potential to learn.
Yes.
And the more potential we have in learning is the more potential we have in understanding.
Yep.
But there's
Exactly.
no guarantee that we're going to understand what we've learned, what we've gotten.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the real journey. The journey is to understanding.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the conversation. It was absolutely amazing. Great
You bet.
conversation. It was fun. And
Yeah, it was.
I want to thank everybody who's listened and check out Iron Wolf's channel and his Twitter. And he's going to have his stories up. He's been posting his stories here, well, this week, actually. I've seen quite a few this week of his chapters and his story there. And the other one will be popping off eventually, too. And
Yeah, I get distracted with the drawings though. The
yeah,
drawings get me off the stories, but it's like a filler
but it's,
when I'm not feeling the story. It's like I've got the drawings and stuff like that. And then I did the what was it, the review of the Mandalorian.
yeah. Yeah, it's really what creation is based on inspiration. So there's always going to be
Mm,
something new and inspiring to check out or develop or work projects to work on. I'm always doing stuff because I can't not do something. I have to create something at all times, and
yeah.
that's the way that my brain works. But you know, I I do appreciate having you on, and thank you to everyone who listened. And have a good day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And I'll talk to everybody later.